Good afternoon. I want to start with some introductions. We're joined by numerous friends and colleagues in law enforcement today. Most importantly, United States Marshal Martin Payne, Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro is here, Dauphin County District Attorney Fran Chardo, Dauphin County Sheriff Nick Commenti, Chief Tom Carter from the Harrisburg City Police Department, Captain Adam Kashiba from the Pennsylvania State Police, York City Chief Troy Bankert, Captain Steve Butler, York City PD, my first assistant, U.S. Attorney Bruce Brandler, Kelly Evans and Christian Stevens from Pennsylvania State Parole, Michael Harpster, Ron Comers, Steve McQueen from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Tony Nelson also from the Marshal Service, and numerous others. Some of the Attorney General Shapiro's top staff is here as well. Early this morning, members of the United States Marshals Fugitive Task Force responded to an address in the 1800 block of Mulberry Street in Harrisburg to serve an arrest warrant for a charge of terroristic threats with a weapon. U.S. Marshals Task Force, for those of you who don't know, is a group made up of Deputy United States Marshals, members of various law enforcement entities such as the Pennsylvania State Police, Municipal Police, Sheriff's Offices, and the Pennsylvania State Board of Probation and Parole agents, and that's why many of them are here today. This morning, the officers knocked at the residence, announced their presence, and made entry. The subject of the warrant and some minor children appeared on the second floor of the residence. The officers identified themselves. The subject of the warrant was placed into handcuffs. At that point, the officers heard gunfire that appeared to emanate from the second floor of the residence. Deputy United States Marshal Christopher Hill and United States Marshal Task Force Officers Kyle Pitts were struck by the gunfire. Members of the task force removed the wounded officers from the residence and established a perimeter around the residence. Preliminary indications from the investigation indicate that a male individual then exited the front of the residence, firing at law enforcement officers. Gunfire was returned, and that male was killed in front of the residence at the scene. Deputy United States Marshal Christopher Hill was killed as a result of the gunfire in the residence. And U.S. Marshal Payne will speak momentarily about his deputy. Christopher Hill died a hero today. We will honor his memory by standing with his family and his brothers and sisters in law enforcement. We will conduct and are already conducting a thorough and cooperative investigation into all aspects of this incident. We will provide answers to Deputy Marshal Hill's family. The investigation is led by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Criminal Investigation Division of the Office of the District Attorney of Dauphin County will investigate the use of force actions by state law enforcement officers at the scene. District Attorney Chardo will speak briefly to that issue. None of us has sufficient words to express our grief and sorrow. Hills have lost a husband, a father, a son, a brother far too soon. Our community has lost a hero who was doing nothing more than his duty. We will honor Deputy Marshal Hill's memory. We will not back down to the violent crime in our neighborhoods. United States Middle District Chief Judge Connor, who was at a meeting in Philadelphia today, has asked that I read the following statement on behalf of the court. And Judge Jones is here with us. On behalf of the entire court, I extend our prayers and heartfelt sympathies to the family of Deputy Marshal Chris Hill and to the Marshal Service on the tragic loss of his life in the line of duty. Chris was a brave and professional officer who served our court with great distinction. Words cannot express our devastation and sense of loss cascading from this tragedy. I'll now call on United States Marshal Martin Payne to speak about his deputy. I know that there will be questions regarding the investigation. We'll be happy to address those as we are able after Marshal Payne has the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I wish we were here in better circumstances. It's profound sadness that I do inform you that Deputy U.S. Marshal Christopher Hill was lost this morning in the line of duty. Deputy Hill was 45 years old. He was a devoted husband and father of two, an 11-year veteran of the U.S. Marshal Service, and his first assignment was in the Superior Court in Washington. In 2009, he transferred here to our Harrisburg office in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. He was an Army veteran serving in Afghanistan from 1993 to 1996. Deputy Hill was one of our deputies who was highly involved in the manhunt for Eric Freen. During the manhunt, he was chosen to be in command of a large group of Deputy U.S. Marshals, FBI agents, and Pennsylvania State Troopers. They conducted numerous woodland searches, as you are all well aware, in this state. Since September 2010, Deputy Hill was a member of our prestigious Special Operations Group, which is a highly trained unit, which also was at the Frayne investigation. He is also known and trained as an explosives breacher. Deputy Hill received the United States Marshal Service Distinguished Group Award for significant contributions in Afghanistan. This is a man who served his country over there with the U.S. Marshal Service, helping to stand up justice, the judicial system in Afghanistan. There's a role that he played there. Deputy Hill was a firearms instructor and a tactical training officer, improving operational safety and mitigation risks for all deputies assigned in the Middle District of Pennsylvania. But this morning, Deputy Hill made the ultimate sacrifice while executing an arrest warrant of a female suspect wanted for terroristic threats with a weapon. While executing the warrant, it was outlined the team was fired upon by a male suspect. Deputy Hill and his two task force officers were struck by gunfire during the assault, and he was transported immediately to Pinnacle Hospital here in Harrisburg, where he died. Deputy Hill served the American people and the citizens of this community with courage. He will be missed, and words cannot say how much. I ask that you keep his wife and two children in your thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. Also wounded on this day during the same event was Officer Kyle Pitts, who is a fugitive task force member from the York City Police Department. Officer Pitts is currently under operation right now. He is expected to survive. He has 3 children, and he has worked for 10 years with the York City Police Department. Thank you.
Whenever there is a use of deadly force by officers in this county, the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office is called upon to review that use of deadly force. That is no less so in a case such as this. It is a sad duty in spite of the loss of life, but we owe it to Deputy Hill to honor his memory, to do our duty. And so we intend to do our duty in spite of the tragic loss of life today. It is apparent that the individual who was killed today, the suspect who was fired on the officers, did so without any cause, but we must nonetheless conduct a full investigation. We owe it to Deputy Hill to do so, and we will do so. We have processed the scene fully, and we will continue to do so. We have interviews to conduct with all the officers and a number of neighbors, and we will come out with conclusions to that investigation, determining whether or not the use of deadly force was justified, although I note that preliminarily, based on the fact that the dead suspect opened fire first, it appears preliminarily, obviously, that it was a justified use of deadly force, but we must complete a complete investigation before formally making that determination. Thank you.
Our entire community mourns the loss of Deputy Hill, and the brotherhood and sisterhood of law enforcement stands together. And the Office of Attorney General will support our federal and local partners in any way needed to keep our community safe. We just simply ask that our community comes together and keeps the Hill family in their thoughts and in their prayers. I want to thank U.S. Attorney Freed for his extraordinary leadership in this very difficult time.
Thanks, General. So this investigation is at a very preliminary stage. You've heard some of the details about an exchange of gunfire at the residence. We are working on confirming identities, and sometimes that's more difficult than you may realize. And we do not want to release any of that information until we are absolutely sure about who we are dealing with and what has happened. So having established those parameters, I'd be happy to take some questions. We'll answer them if we can, and as you know, if I can't, I will tell you that I cannot.
Has law enforcement had any previous run-ins with the shooter?
We're working on a definite identity, so it's too soon to answer that question.
Were the officers wearing body armor?
Yes.
Mr. Freed, I'm trying to, the sequence of events, they went in and handcuffed the female suspect. The shooting occurred inside.
The shooting began, yes. The preliminary investigation reveals, and based on the very limited interviews that have been done, now there's an art to doing these interviews when officer-involved shootings happen. There are rules that have to be followed. There's statutory or case law that's got to be followed. So we try to get minimal facts to determine what has happened. And the initial indication from those minimal facts is that, and in fact it's backed up by the physical evidence that we've seen to this point, that the gunfire did start from the residence from upstairs to downstairs. And then later, when the man who was killed came out of the residence firing at the police, there was firing outside of the residence as well.
And at that point, were the suspect, the female suspect, handcuffed suspect, and the officers still in the house, or were they outside the house?
The wounded officers had been taken out the back. Other officers had established a perimeter at the front, and that's where the suspect came out and shot. I don't believe that we have evidence at this point to indicate exactly where everybody else was, so I don't want to speculate on that.
What expectation was there that someone else would, like this suspect, would be in the home?
I think that expectation is always there, and the Marshals Task Force is made up of experienced marshals, experienced officers who are, frankly, given to us by the entities that you see up here. I just said in our meeting downstairs that in my experience in law enforcement, which is over 20 years, mostly as a state prosecutor, I've never known the U.S. Marshal Service to say no to a request for assistance. So I am confident that based on their training, they were prepared for this eventuality. We'll see what the investigation shows about how exactly this happened. Right in the middle.
But the suspect that's in custody, there was no struggle there with her at all?
Not that we've heard up to this point. I think she was safely taken into custody. Go ahead, Mark.
Can you clarify or say anything about who lived in the house? I
assume it was the woman who you were serving the warrant on? And then also, the suspect, do you have any information whether he lived there, relationship between him and the woman, and who else lived there?
So we just don't know about the male. Obviously, he was there today. How often he was there, whether he was staying there, we just don't know that at this point, Mark. It was her residence, as far as we can tell. That's how the police ended up there with her address on the warrant. And I guess to fill in that detail, that woman has been taken into custody and taken to the Dauphin County Booking Center. And there were children there, multiple children, I think 2, Mark, but more than 1.
And where are they now?
I don't know the answer to that question. Based on experience, they'd either be with relatives or children. Steve?
Dave, can you give any more details about the terroristic threats warrant? Like what municipality was it for and what were the details about that?
Do you know if that was a city? We just don't know. Now, when the Marshals Task Force is involved, the decisions that are made for them to get involved and to assist with investigations, it's not just every warrant out there that the locals call up the marshals and say, hey, let's go grab this person. So, although we don't know at this point, we will know what the larger purpose was for being there. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm sorry if you already addressed this, but there was a third officer shot, right? So there were York City and the deceased, but there was a third officer hit, right?
So there's some, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but we're trying to determine exactly what happened, Dennis. There's been some indication that another officer was struck with a projectile in the body armor, but not wounded. And I think that's where the numbers are coming from.
What was the size of the task force? How many were serving the arrest warrant? How many were officers?
Marshall, do you know how many were out there today?
Yeah. As you know, the U.S. Marshal Service, especially those in the community and really, quite frankly, most of the country, it's something that we do, serving warrants against bad guys. And we typically operate with a minimum of 6. I think there was at least 7 there today to effect that arrest. So with, again, multiple agencies, which is a common practice.
Can you say at this point with any certainty who fired the shot that struck Deputy Hill?
No. Steve?
Did the team go through the front door or the back door initially?
I believe the initial entry was through the front.
What is the woman's name?
Well, there are a couple of names that have been used on the warrant, so I'd rather that you refer to whatever paperwork she was arrested under, and I don't have that in front of me.
How is the condition of the third officer that was injured?
I don't know that we can say he was injured. See, that's where some of the confusion is. I believe he was struck on the body armor. Oh, okay. To the extent that your question was about friendly fire, there's no indication of that.
No, I didn't ask that. I asked
Okay.
if there's any indication of who fired the shot.
That may or may not become clear in the course of the investigation. I mean, we will know who fired, and ballistics should be able to tell us who hit.
What sort of weapon or weapons was the shooter using?
That's part of the investigation. I don't want to release that now. There at least one handgun. I can say that.
For the 2 victims, how many times were they hit?
Don't know that yet. That'll be part of the investigation. Is there somebody else over here?
Do you know the relationship between the suspect and the woman?
Well, we do not. Once we determine the identification, 100% of the suspect and have more opportunity to investigate, I'm sure that we'll be able to determine what that is. Back here.
The woman who was taken into custody, is she cooperating in any way?
I wouldn't want to characterize it one way or the other at this point.
Do you have any, the age of the kids? Little,
Kids that were in the
teenagers?
house?
Yeah.
I believe between 9 and 13. That's the initial indication.
A report that came out from the city indicated the Harrisburg officer critically injured the shooter. Or is it safe to say, do we know who killed the hail be fired on them?
No, to the extent information like that was released, that's not supported by any investigation at this point.
Marshal Payne, the raid.
Well,
Lack of a better
let's
word.
not refer to it
Yeah,
in
I
those
was gonna
terms,
say, what is the word
please.
you'd like to use?
Go ahead.
The time of day that they went into the building, is that unusual? They went at 6:30 in the morning? Or don't you typically go in when people are usually caught off guard?
So typically, most warrants are effected during the AM hours or the PM hours, it depends, but 6 AM and that time frame is a common time frame for the U.S. Marshals. I'm not trying to give up any investigative techniques, but I think it's well known amongst the law enforcement community and the prosecutors that 6 AM is a common practice to effect an arrest for reasons which are somewhat obvious.
Marshal Payne, can you give
Yes.
us a little more sense of Christopher Hill? You spoke of him, we just described as a hero, but what kind of worker
Yeah.
you experience?
Yeah, Chris is, I've been with the U.S. Marshals almost 30 years now, and Chris is just one of those guys that rises to the top. He's, as a member of Special Operations Group, which he was, it's comprised of less than 1% of the agency, and so you don't get into that unit unless you have special skill sets that allow you to get in. I know that for a fact, as I happen to be one of them in the past. So Chris is the cream of the crop. He's one of our best, and tactically, not to diminish anybody's roles or capabilities, you probably would not find a better tactical operator in the state of Pennsylvania. Yes.
Did other members of the task force, the 7 or so people who were there, did others directly witness the 2 officers being shot? And then how did the officers, you talked about, I think, Mr. Freed talked about that they were taken out the back. Were there other members of the task force that had assisted them? Were they able to walk out? Were they carried out? Do you have any other details
Yeah.
about what happened?
Well, now you're getting into the investigation activities of that case, and I would at this time defer any response. Yes.
Did officers use force arresting the subject of the warrant, or did she or police admit?
I don't have that information at this time. As I understand, I don't believe there was a significant incident in affecting the arrest of the target. Yes.
Is the exact address of where this happened being released at this time?
Not at this time.
Is there an arraignment scheduled for the woman?
No. No, it's nothing that would be scheduled because of the convenience of the magistrate.
So you'll be able to run that info down through booking. I want to thank everybody for your understanding in your coverage. Obviously, it's a difficult day for the entire law enforcement family, local, state, and federal. We will do our best within the dictates that have been established for us by the law and by the courts to keep you apprised of information as this investigation progresses. Whether or not charges are filed as a result of it, we will provide you those answers that we indicated that this investigation is seeking. Thank you very much.